from CECP's annual research. Our apologies for the slight delay in getting started this morning. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, but it seems like everything is set and ready to go. So just to make sure, if everybody could just type, we can hear you or sounds great into the chat box on the right side of your screen. That way we'll know that the audio is working. All right, great. Looks like everyone can hear us. Yay. Oh, hi, is that Laurel and Jen? Is. Hi, welcome back. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We're just getting started. Okay. So if you guys want to go ahead and just put your line on mute for a minute, and then we'll get going. Okay. So this morning actually marks kind of a fun tradition that we've developed here at VolunteerMatch with inviting CECP onto the Best Practice Network webinar series to share their annual giving in numbers research. Before we actually dive into everything, I wanted to go through just a few housekeeping items. So at the end of the presentation this morning, we're going to hold some time to ask questions to the presenters. And you can actually submit those questions throughout the presentation this morning in two different ways. So the first way is by typing the questions into the box on the right side of your screen where you just let us know that we sounded so great. And the second way is to actually tweet them to us. So you can send a tweet to @VM_solutions using the hashtag VPN. And throughout the presentation, we'll just kind of gather those for you and then post them at the end. One last thing to just keep in mind is that a copy of the slides as well as a recording of the live webinar is going to be circulated after the event. So you will have access to all of this information afterward. So first thing this morning, we're going to be hearing from Michael Stroik. Michael is CECP's Manager of Research and Analytics, and he's going to be sharing with us the emerging trends in corporate volunteering and giving through highlights from that annual giving in numbers research that we were just talking about. He'll also be using some supporting data from other CECP studies. So just to give you a little background on the giving in numbers study, it's an annual survey that's designed to gain insight into how giving has been evolving since before the global recession. And the 2013 edition surveyed 240 of the largest companies in the world, including 60 of the largest 100 in the Fortune 500 list. So Michael's going to be taking us through those year-over-year trends, but one that we're really going to be looking more closely at is kind of the shift from a more financial-based giving program to companies now looking internally at the products, services, and employee expertise that are really at the core of their business. So after we kind of go through the overview, we're going to be really seeing this trend in action and how it impacts the nonprofits at the receiving end when we're joined by Jennifer Cortner, who is the Vice President of Account Services at Discovery Communications, and Shari Ilsen, who happens to be VolunteerMatch's own Senior Online Communications Manager. So Jennifer works very closely with Discovery's annual pro bono marathon, Creating Change, where every year they go and match their incredibly talented employees from this year 25 different departments with nonprofits that need their services. And for the third year in a row, so 3 seems to be a theme here today, VolunteerMatch has been one of the very lucky recipients of this pro bono service. So Shari is going to be sharing with us the impact that we've seen internally as a result of this program. So my goal this morning is that you guys all leave today not only understanding the larger picture of what's been going on in the world of corporate giving and volunteering, but also inspired to really look at the core competencies of your own companies and imagine new and innovative ways that you can use them to create lasting impact. So without further ado, I will welcome Michael on the line and get us started. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Lauren. Thank you to you and Jennifer and Shari for presenting here with me today, and thanks to everybody for taking a little time to discuss corporate giving and employee engagement trends. I feel like this holiday time frame, people talk about individuals getting in the giving spirit. We're excited about companies doing the same thing. And I will say that I am about 3 business days away from a week-long break, so if I sound like I'm starting to daydream a little bit about eggnog or something like that, go ahead and ping me with a difficult question on Twitter, and I'll be tracking throughout, and I know we're going to have a discussion at the end with sort of all questions that are out there. But for today's agenda, as you can see on the slide here, I'm going to share a little bit about my employer, CECP, and my core responsibilities as the Manager of Research and Analytics for the organization. I'm going to then dive into the trends analysis, looking specifically at how giving has evolved since before the global recession. And as today is hosted by my friends at VolunteerMatch, I'm going to close with trends we're seeing in employee engagement, and including some statistics on how companies are offering different types of employee volunteer programs since before the global recession. So now getting into about CECP. So we were originally founded as the Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy. Now we know that's a bit of a mouthful, so that's why we've transitioned to using the acronym a bit more regularly. And we were actually started by Paul Newman, yes, the actor, along with business leaders that believed corporate America could be a force for good in society. And that's something we at CECP believe to this day. And to be frank with you all, as I'm sure many of you know, there's a lot at stake here because there's just a lot of money with these companies. And the average large business that we study gives about $20 million in a year. So we're always encouraging companies not only to give more, but to give more strategically as well, and to factor in, a number of different factors like customer influence, leadership involvement, community need, business resources, the list goes on, and it's something that as we consult with companies on their overall giving programs, these are the things that we're typically talking about. In terms of nonprofits in this sort of research consulting space, we feel like we've set ourselves apart in two ways. One is we have a slight monopoly on the data. We've been collecting in-depth information from companies directly since 2001. But then also CEO engagement. You see we have 149 CEOs and chairpersons engaged with us, and so that's how we were really started, was this community of CEOs that comes together on a regular basis and looks at how collectively companies can make an effect on society through regular business operations. All right, on the next slide, I want to show our annual research report. So this is really my core responsibility, working in research and analytics, is the management of the overall research process. And the publication of our annual trends report, giving in numbers, and you can see the different year slides in there. And then on the top left is the report we just released earlier this fall. And this report is based on that annual survey that Lauren mentioned, and it's of the world's largest businesses. So a lot of the stats and the trends you're going to see during my part of this conversation is among the largest businesses in the world. So we typically work with global 1,000 companies. And have about a minimum of $2 billion in annual revenues that we want to look at to kind of get a look at big business in terms of how they're providing support to communities. So we include all giving to 501c3 nonprofits, and we also count non-cash. And so that's what a bit of our conversation is going to be included in here today. And we include non-cash giving valued at fair market value. And this non-cash does include pro bono service. But it does not include other types of sort of the regular volunteer service that's out there, and I'll get into sort of how we value pro bono service within that. And then I'm excited to hear from Discovery Communications about their program and some of the impact they're making, because it's a truly transformative program that they put together. But let's dive into some of the data. I want to look at some of the trends that we've had over the past several years, and here we take a look at how companies have evolved in terms of their giving through a distribution chart comparing 2007 to 2012. So this year's study, we wanted to look closely at that recession of 2008 and 2009. And we typically have looked at giving over a 2-year or 3-year match set. But we keep getting asked by reporters primarily, but also companies and also nonprofits and academics who are interested to know how giving has changed since before the global recession. And on this slide, you're able to see specifically how giving up or down changed between 2007 and 2012 after taking into account inflation. And first and foremost, the number one thing we noticed when we pulled these numbers, and this is really the first thing we look at after we gather all the giving data from our companies, is that the majority of companies, 59%, are giving more than before the recession began. The other aspect on here to take note of is that the changes are really quite polarized. So 38%, that bar on the far right, they're giving legitimately more than they were before the global recession. So on the other hand, you see on the left that 24%, that these are the companies that are giving legitimately less. So it's like there's this almost development in essence, this U shape of the distribution chart really tells us that, there's been this division of haves and have-nots coming out of the global recession. As I mentioned before, this is on a base for the average company of $20 million, so increasing by more than 25%, as you see on the far right. That's a pretty legitimate increase for a lot of the companies that we're working with. On the next slide, we wanted to examine how business performance has changed over the years. And really, to no surprise, you can see that revenues and profits, they really, quite frankly, tanked between 2007 and 2008 and then 2009. And we've seen improvements, but the typical company has still not fully recovered to where they were before the global recession. And if you look at unemployment rates, and I think it's 92% of our companies are based out of the States. And in the United States, the employment rate's gotten better these past couple of years, but it's nowhere near where it was before the global recession. So it's something that we're keeping an eye on because we know there's this relationship between how business performs and realistically how much profit you would have left over to make contributions as well. We were a little surprised on the far right to see that the drop in pre-tax profits from 2011 to 2012. But don't necessarily assume that this means we'll see a drop in giving for 2013. We recently conducted a regression analysis with Dr. Henry Silbert of the Conference Board, and we found no statistically significant relationship between the changes in 1 year in profits and then that following year, how that change happens within a 2-year period. So we're learning that companies are really trying to maintain their giving levels despite drops in profits or revenues over that time frame. So we know the recession is still lingering based on that last slide, and we know that giving is up generally overall for the majority of companies. And we also want to take a look at what's really driving this growth. And in aggregate, we saw that non-cash giving comprised of what the typical one is product donations, but then also pro bono service and then other types of non-cash gifts like office equipment or things of that matter. That's really increased, especially in aggregate. You look at this slide here, you can see in 2007, 57% of overall giving was in the form of non-cash contributions, and by 2012, that was all the way up to 69%. We're finding that companies are really looking inward to their own assets to strategically support communities in ways that only a major company that has these type of physical resources like product, but then also the vast employee counts that a lot of these companies have as well. And we know from Giving USA that the total charitable giving in the United States in 2012 was about $316 billion, and the average company, as I said, gives about $20 million, so that's 0.0006% of that, and so that includes all of individuals, private foundations, and everything there. So to make a real true impact, we're learning that companies are looking to utilize their non-cash resources in new ways. One final note on this slide and these data points is that this non-cash giving this is an aggregate. So this is the total giving of all companies that responded to our survey in each year, so that we look at only companies that responded in every year. And so what you'll notice is that if you actually dig into the numbers is that there's a few very large companies, and particularly pharmaceutical companies, which provide vast drug contributions to their patient assistance programs, that really sort of drive the statistics that I'm showing here, drive this kind of overall growth. The average company gives more cash than non-cash, but it's interesting because the trend is the same. And so at the end, I'm going to share my email address, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions on that. But be sure to check out Giving in Numbers, and it's free for download on our website, CECP.co, because it really dives into the fact that there are a few companies that are driving this, but overall we're seeing this trend across the board. So other than non-cash, on the next slide, some of the reasons for giving increases include this business performance, like I talked about before. We don't see a statistically significant relationship, but this is what companies are telling us on an average basis, that business performance is doing better, especially over a longer period of time, then they're going to start contributing more during that time frame as well. As I'm going to get into in a few slides, we've also seen this increased commitment to education, where companies that have supported education in the past are really trying to commit more as an overall portion of their budget as they look forward to their overall giving strategies. As for giving decreases, I have listed some of the themes here for why corporations have explained recent giving declines. And you'll note that the disaster spending was actually a surprise to us, especially with the publicity around Hurricane Sandy in 2012. But it seems that companies are really planning for the worst in terms of disasters, and many companies have told us that in 2012 they didn't contribute as much as they had expected to during that fiscal year. All right, on the next slide, I wanted to share a little bit about where funds are going from these companies. So for the first time here, you can see that education became that top focus area, and that includes both K-12 education and higher education contributions. And it includes both giving to public schools, but also to nonprofits that support those schools and support those children across the country and across the globe. And so for the first time since we started measuring and reporting this back in 2006 was our first giving in numbers, this is that first time that education was that top spot. And it was very close. Health and social services has consistently been #1, and now that dropped right behind it. But this has really shown us how far-reaching corporate support of education really is. As this isn't necessarily, stark increases in terms of the overall percentage within budgets of companies that have responded to our survey year over year, but as we reach more companies, and we had 240 of the largest businesses in the world complete our survey this last year, we're learning that it's really far-reaching, that there's so many companies that are engaged with educational initiatives that it's slowly become that top program area as we've had more and more companies stepping in. And we hear a lot about why companies are supporting education, and a lot of folks see it as a critique of the leaders in the public sector and in the educational field, and we haven't heard that from companies. We've heard it from more that companies are interested in the most wicked of problems, and this is more of a recognition of how advanced some of the problems, especially in the United States, around education are. And so we expect this trend to continue in future years as we start collecting more data over next year. On the next slide, we noticed a couple interesting trends when we looked year over year, especially throughout the recession. One thing you'll note is that community and economic development really spiked during the global recession, and that was one of our fastest growing areas. And what was really unexpected was this steady move away from art support. The average percentage of a budget going to art support from 2007 until 2012 fell in every single year. And this is one important element to recognize here is that this is the average percentages. So we take the average portion of a contribution going to the arts in each year and average those across all companies. So it takes a lot of companies to make a change to really make a move in the overall percentage. So to see that change in every year was a really big surprise to us. And it's been really interesting digging into the numbers. We haven't necessarily seen companies walking away from arts partnerships per se, but instead we've seen them sort of methodically reducing contributions over time. And so the average gift back in 2007 from a company was about $3.1 million, and that was down to $1.9 million this last year in 2012. So that was a bit of a surprise that we had there. On slide 13, one of the major reasons for sort of the steady decline that we've seen is that companies are really becoming more focused in their grant making. They're giving fewer but larger grants, and the main aim here is to drive deeper impact with each contribution. And we learned, the stats you see here is that about a third of companies that responded to our survey since 2007 contributed half or more of their budget to one specific program area in 2012, and back in 2007 that was 22%. So as companies sort of focus their funds to individual program areas, other programs naturally sort of lose out. And it appears that is part of what's happening for arts organizations across the gives you an idea of how companies are giving and sort of the financial implications of that. And now I'm going to dive into some of the employee engagement side of things as well. So we've seen giving practices evolve. And the one side of giving, other than pro bono, that's included in overall gifts, in a giving campaign, that's like a United Way campaign, or an ongoing year-round policy, typically coming out of a paycheck or something like that. And it was interesting because the fastest growing program type in this area was disaster relief, as companies were developing specific matching gifts programs to respond to specific disasters. Now, that only made up 6% of overall matching gifts, as you can see here, but it was growing tremendously throughout the global recession and then after, as companies are really trying to utilize sort of the publicity around these events to engage their employees and help leverage more funds for the people in need. The typical participation rate for year-round policy was around 8% of employees. And so this is an area that we know nonprofits see as an opportunity for the future as they look to engage their sort of regular individual donor audience. All right, on the next slide, in terms of volunteer engagement, we've seen a tremendous growth in volunteer offerings since we offered a paid release time or volunteer time off policy, and that was up to 70% by 2012. And this increase, it was interesting to see that it was evident for both companies that increased and decreased giving. Though the increase in offerings for employee volunteer programs as we talked to companies were for a variety but very different reasons. A lot of times companies that decreased giving over the past several years informed us that they no longer have the excess profits that they had before sort of the effects of the recession were felt. A lot of the consumer discretionary type companies. But they still want to contribute to communities. And employee volunteerism was one way in which they felt that they could still make a meaningful impact. And companies that were increasing giving, they want to show off their work. They want to get their employees engaged and try to pair these initiatives with with volunteer employees. On the map that we show regionally, we found that Northeast companies based out of the Northeast and companies based out of the Midwest were really most likely to offer paid release time programs. And in a couple slides, I'm going to show a little bit more about what was more popular in the West and the South. But this is one thing we often recognize is the different regions, and we often hear from companies that want to know almost strategically and competitively what other companies in their areas with whom they're competing for top talent from schools or from other companies, what kind of programs they're offering. And this is a big one because, while this is not included in total giving in any way, they do have a considerable cost to the companies that are offering them. And for these large companies, the median compensation cost for a volunteer time off program was more than $2 million in 2012. So while it's not included in giving, we do think it's an important element that shows how companies are supporting communities in unique and oftentimes a fun way for employees as well. We've also seen a growth in pro bono sort of support, and this is that skills-based sort of professional services that are being provided. And I'm really excited to hear about Discovery Communications and some of the work that they're doing in this area. But you can see by the slides here that we've seen a tremendous growth over the past several years. And we feel like this was something that's really been driven by the Taproot Foundations of the world, the Billion Plus Change movement. And they're really driving companies to not only offer these types of programs, but making commitments to grow and to measure them and measure the effects of them over time. And so this was one important element of how companies are supporting organizations. And on the next slide, you're able to see that the pro bono aspect, that it is a part of overall giving. You can see by industry in terms of the non-cash types of support, how much in each industry the companies are providing on average in pro bono support. So like I said, product donations are really the they're the biggest. I mean, they're the 67%. They're more than 2/3 of the overall support that's provided in non-cash. But pro bono is at 16%, and we're seeing that grow year over year. Particularly, we're seeing a lot in financials. I mean, you can see the 35% for financial firms. A lot of that's driven by the fact that most financial firms don't have a physical product that they would contribute. So that's part of driving that. But then information technology is also really high as well. They're offering these types of programs more than a lot of other industries in that case as well. And so we're often asked about how we value pro bono time. And we recommend to our companies using fair market value. So that's really using that hourly cost of paying a client that would, if a client going to pay rates, we would include we include recommendations within our valuation guidance for estimating the value based on skill area like marketing or accounting or anything within that. All right, on the next slide, I wanted to dive a little bit into some of the more successful programs stood out as the most successful. And in 2012, we were interested to find out that paid release time programs took the top spot, both domestically and internationally. And you can see some of the other types of programs that are included here. Company-wide days of service, volunteer awards, flexible scheduling where you can volunteer through a company program outside of regular work hours. Historically, we've seen dollars for doers really be that top program area at the domestic level. That's historically taken the top spot, but this was the first year that we've seen paid release time take over as the most successful program. And we really look at success in terms of how well companies are communicating and getting employees engaged throughout the business and know about the overall program. On the next slide, I have another map, and as I'm sure you would imagine, the paid release time in the Midwest and in the Northeast, like I mentioned before, they were really the most successful overall and most commonly offered in the Northeast and the Midwest. But in the South, we recognize some different trends. So we recognize companies were really striving to engage a more mature employee by offering these volunteer programs where their full families can really come and participate with them. On the West Coast, on the other hand, this is where dollars for doers has really maintained consistent sort of growth and development as companies are really putting their money where their mouth is. And when employees are volunteering a certain level of hours, then the company's making a financial contribution to the nonprofit that they're working with within that area. So these were just those areas that those programs that were most successful and most offered in the different regions comparatively to the other ones. Part of our consulting work with member companies that we work with on an annual basis involves benchmarking not just by region. I mean, this employee engagement is really that one area that companies are really engaged and want to get an understanding about how regional peers compare, but also industry related. And so here, I've identified by industry which employee volunteer programs offered most by companies within their specific industry. They're, the majority of them are based in New York City, so they're in that Northeast, so that makes sense that we see that there based on the maps that we showed before. It has been interesting providing benchmarking on volunteer programs because it's clear that, companies are now using their programs to build a competitive advantage in sort of their recruiting and their retention sort of strategies and movements towards the top talent in their region or industry. And we believe these types of programs really be the key differentiator for companies as they look to attract the highest performing candidates. And as I mentioned before, we're going to hear from Discovery Communications about their program in just a moment. Slide on 22, I believe. I wanted to make one final comment on slide 22 where I've shared a little bit about sort of companies that are increasing giving or decreasing giving, some of the reasons that they're offering these volunteer programs and how they're using them. But one of the things we've also been hearing about in the early 1980s that's coming into the workforce, And we're hearing from companies that they're hearing it from this younger generation regularly, that they want to be engaged in overall giving programs. And I included this stat from a Cone study about this 87% of millennials considering a company's commitment to social and environmental causes when deciding where to work. And that really highlights how important it is to this group that a company is socially responsible in a variety of ways. And it's really interesting because this younger generation has really come to expect this this type of engagement. And unlike the old days when this type of thing really surprised or delighted folks, part of the equation and people they're friends with and their family members, we know they're engaged. We have the sort of social media heads on some of these people, and if their company isn't engaging them in their programs, they're likely hearing about it from others within their network. So it's been an exciting development to say the least, and we're interested to see what's happening and in this area. And I think it's just such an exciting place to be, and I'm glad we have this relationship with VolunteerMatch. That's what I have for my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to field questions about the research, and I think we're going to have an open question and answer time at the end, so please submit them on Twitter or through this program. But I think I'm going to pass it along now to one of the other presenters. So thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much, Michael. And yes, we have plenty of questions for you. So once we kind of hear more about Discovery and their programs and how we've been delighted to be a part of those programs, we will dive right into those questions. So next up, we will have Jennifer. Are you on the line?
You bet. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Cortner. I'm at Discovery. I work for our in-house creative agency, and I'm actually joined by two of my colleagues, Jennifer Button and Laurel Shep, and we make quite the formidable team when it comes to what we do here at Discovery. Michael, that was a great presentation, and I was nodding my head through most of your slides. For two reasons, I kind of come to this conversation wearing two hats. One, certainly on the Discovery side, but I'm also on the board of directors for a local nonprofit here. Shown here, I think, line up exactly with where corporate giving is here at Discovery, as well as what I noticed with my other hat when we're trying to raise money, either from individuals or institutions. It was very revealing. I definitely plan on downloading this presentation. It was awesome, so thank you. I'll probably start by riffing off your last slide, which is the millennial slide, and just let you guys know that at Discover we have a very young employee base. The average age here is 32. So, and we have about 5,000 employees worldwide. Actually, it's more like 5,500 now, I think. But that is something that's very is the fact that Discovery, who is coming up, believe it or not, on its 30-year anniversary, is a very mission-driven company and always has been. From day one, John Hendricks, who is our founder, has been a very mission-driven guy, and he drills that down into everything that we do here at Discovery. We are about inspiring curiosity. We're about storytelling. It's very much in our DNA for us, actually, to work for a company that really what we say and what we do are completely hand in hand. So with that said, I'll just jump into the very first slide that we have here, which really outlines some of the programs that we have in our corporate social responsibility initiatives. And as you can see, it's a combination of exactly what Michael just talked about. We have a lot of programs that work around employee engagement and giving our employees a chance to either volunteer, take a paid day off to do just that. We'll talk about our Creating Change initiative, which is what is near and dear to my heart, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. To Michael's point, where disaster relief seems to be something that's important for a lot of companies, it is for us. It's the right thing to do. It has a lot of executive buy-in here, and we, like most organizations, started with this one particular event, but it's really grown, and it's something that gives us tremendous pride, number one, but more importantly, our employees absolutely love it. And it's something that, before we were starting this call, we're in the middle of reviews right now here at Discovery, so we all have to do our own assessments. And one of the people on my team got to help this year go up to New Jersey to help in the after effects of Hurricane Sandy. And she said it was one of the hallmarks of her year, was really being able to have a part in that and being able to volunteer. It's very tangible, it's very tactile, and they get to actually meet the people that they're helping, which goes a long way. We have something called the Discovery Learning Alliance, which is where we actually put some of our corporate dollars behind. We are a key sponsor of this organization. They are housed out of Discovery, so we they set up shop here. All their equipment is set up here. We electronically outfit them, and they have desks here and they have staff here. But we also give them quite a bit of our money, and they help basically transform the education business in developing nations, and they do an amazing job doing it. It's a terrific organization. And then lastly, we have a lot of these other initiatives that are really driven by the different brands and businesses here at Discovery. What a lot of people don't realize about Discovery is how many brands actually fall underneath our umbrella. We are certainly Discovery Channel, but there are actually 13 networks here domestically and a whole bunch of others globally. And each one of those operate and have a leadership behind them. So many of these things that you see here, many of these programs are driven by individual business units, and each one of those initiatives lines up with something that they're doing already in their business, whether it be responding to some of their key fans, their key viewers, something that their talent feels passionate about. But they're really great programs that each one of these business units kind of takes on. The second slide is about our initiative called Creating Change, and it is something that we took on. We just finished up our 4th year, and it's been the most exciting and fun initiative that we get to work on. Michael, you mentioned that this is where our skills-based initiative comes in. Most of the other programs I talked about were volunteer-based, where anybody can participate. But we are a creative company, and our output is creative stuff. You know, we produce TV shows and a lot of interactive products. This is a way for us to tap our employee base during a 12-hour creative marathon where we can deliver pro bono actual deliverables that nonprofits can use. And that looks like PSAs, ad campaigns, websites, microsites, anything that you can imagine that might support either a marketing campaign, image and branding awareness, something that might help support their gala or their event. And they actually get these things that they can then use throughout the year. I will say that it's been one of the things that has been fun and challenging, and you mentioned Taproot actually, Michael. We were actually inspired and learned about something like this through Taproot. And Jen Button and another former colleague trundled down to South Carolina, right? Yeah. To South Carolina, to a very small ad agency down there who did a 24-hour marathon and literally worked 24 hours a day to deliver pro bono goods to these was it just one nonprofit?
No,
multiple nonprofits. Mm-hmm. She came back exhausted but exhilarated and said, we should do something like this here. And so Jen and I and 2 other people from my team, Jen works from the corporate perspective, and she's in corporate communications. I'm on the in-house creative agency. So kind of think about corporate and creative holding hands, and we created this little task force and decided to launch this event at Discovery. The first year, I will tell you, was probably our hardest year, only because we really didn't know what we were doing, in all fairness. And we put out a submission for applications, and we got over 200 the first year. And we had a committee of about 10 people trying to select, and man, was that ever hard, trying to figure out and we wanted to say yes to everybody. And we practically did, and it nearly killed us. We actually ended up saying yes to about 40 nonprofits, and we were successful, and what we delivered was fantastic. But truth be told, we actually took on too much. And one of the things that we learned after that first year was 2 things. We need to be strategic and thoughtful about how many and who we select. We completely refined the application process, which got a lot better. And we took on fewer organizations, but out of that was also birthed this conference that we now use in addition to delivering creative work. We have this phenomenal conference that we put together. And that was in response to the fact that we couldn't say no, and we didn't want to say no to all these organizations who are applying. So of all those that apply, they get the opportunity to attend this conference. And it did 2 things for us. One, not only did it enable us to broaden the net amongst many more nonprofits, but it also enabled us to broaden the net amongst our employee base. We were very specific about who could work on creating change from a creative perspective because we wanted to make sure that the skills lined up with what people were asking for. But we have so many smart, intelligent, amazing people here who know a lot about branding and social media and cause marketing and crisis marketing and IT and HR. So we put out this kind of request to our other employees, and from that we created this conference that for a full day people can either hear sessions around some of these fields of expertise, or they get one-on-one sessions with individuals from around the company. And it's really been a win-win, I think. We survey both internally and externally every year, and every year I think we get a little bit better at this. But the success rate both internally and externally has been pretty high and very significant. I would say the two other final things I'll say about this is that it's really important to, if you're going to do this, do it right. And this is no small feat that we take on here at Discovery. And again, we're really lucky that we have such a great team of event planners and logistics people. And we put live events together all the time as part of our core business. But in addition to delivering these creative deliverables, this conference is really buttoned up. And you just need to make sure that you have the right resources and the right people on the bus to really make sure that you're going to have an impact when you do it and when you do it right, because it is no small task for us to put this together, and it's very labor intensive, so just making sure you have the right people. And to that point, we actually extend our pro bono request to a lot of partners that we have throughout the year. We have, as you can imagine, a lot of vendors that help us with music and photography and videography, and they very generously usually help us out with some of these efforts. And I mean, it's an overused adage, but it really does take a village to pull this off, and then we recognize them as well. Michael, to your point about how you place a value on this, for us, it's kind of back-of-the-envelope math to a degree, and while we call it a 12-hour creative marathon, it's actually much more than that. The practicality and the reality of it is that it usually takes us several months of pre-production on this, and my team is usually the team that does the project management, so they're heavy into it for 2 weeks in advance. So if we tallied up the hours for real, I think it would be a lot more than what you see here on the slide. But we do that, and so that we can at least have some sort of measure of what are we giving back in market value, and that's what that number is that you see there. So that's it from us. Is there anything else? I would just throw to Jen or Laurel if there's any other comments that you guys want to make, and then we'll certainly open it up for questions at the end.
Great, thank you so much. So, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, VolunteerMatch has been extremely fortunate to be on the receiving end of this wonderful program for a few years now. And so we're going to have Shari Ilsen hop on the line here. I think she's actually in the room with me, which is kind of fun to have somebody here. And talk a little bit about, you know, from the nonprofit perspective, how we've really benefited and seen some impact from being part of this type of program.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. As Lauren said, my name is Shari Ilsen. I run online communications here at VolunteerMatch. And mainly, I'm here today to back up everything that Jennifer just said. I think it's all true. And over the 3 years that VolunteerMatch has been lucky enough to benefit from Discovery's Creating Change pro bono program, we've really been wowed by their commitment and the way that they really seem to get it. They get nonprofits, and this program, as it's evolved, they've become a really effective and impactful partner for the nonprofits that participate. It's not just a one-and-done sort of thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience over the past 3 years. This slide here, besides expressing our love for pro bono, just simply points out the 3 main benefits that VolunteerMatch has seen from Discovery Creating Change. And they're benefits that many pro bono, successful pro bono relationships will create for the nonprofits involved. The first one is the most obvious, perhaps, and that's financial benefits. Most nonprofits couldn't afford to pay to do what Discovery, for example, is is doing. But if they could, it would cost a lot of money. And VolunteerMatch, we were able to benefit from our relationship with Discovery Communications so that we wouldn't have to put really important resources into these things, and we can focus on using those resources to work towards further fulfilling our mission. The second is the gift of time. I could try and do these things on my own, but it would take hours and hours. It certainly would take more than 12 hours. And so having the talented Discovery employees giving their gift of time to us frees up our staff capacity to work on other critical things. Finally, something that I think a lot of people might overlook when they think about pro bono, which is quality. There's no way we could produce things of the quality that Discovery Communications employees can do. They are world class. They're pretty much the best at what they do, and to have the opportunity to work with them on things that help our cause and help our community is unbelievable. And I'm going to show you in a second a little bit, some samples of the work that they've done for us, so you can get a better idea of how amazing and what a difference it's made for us. But just for some context, at VolunteerMatch, our main mission is to make it easier for good people and good causes to connect so that we can strengthen our communities. The key to this is awareness. We need people to know who we are and what we do so that they take advantage of our services, whether it's volunteers looking for a place to volunteer, nonprofits making connections with volunteers, or the work that we do with companies to help facilitate employee involvement and consumer engagement. People need to know about us. So brand awareness, as Jennifer was talking about, is a major part of creating change. That's a huge thing for us. It could be one of the most important things, and we're constantly looking for new ways to get the word out about what we do and to form new connections with people in our community. So, so what Discovery has done for us has really helped us rise to new levels when it comes to raising awareness about what we do in the world. So this is from the first year that we participated in creating change. This is an ad that Discovery created for us for the Nonprofit Technology Conference. And this we were able to put in the program booklet, and it was seen by 2,000, 2,500 nonprofit attendees. So that's thousands more people that now know that we will help them for free, and it's a beautiful ad. Next. That same year, Discovery also did unbelievable work helping us redesign our blogs. This is our Volunteering is CSR blog, where we focus on how volunteering fits into companies' corporate social responsibility initiatives. And with Discovery's help, we streamlined the theme and the design, making it a much better place for people to come to take advantage of the resources that we offer. Last year, Discovery took some new themes that we were working with and created this design for us. It's just so much fun, and I love it. And what's great about what Discovery did for us is we were then able to repurpose it. If you go to the next slide, you'll see we were able to repurpose these designs. There's a picture of me with some other people at a conference, and you can see the banner in the background. And then that's also a snapshot of our Facebook page. So the work that Discovery does and what these types of pro bono engagements create, they really, it's like the butterfly effect. You can repurpose them, and they make a difference far beyond just one particular project or one particular program. Next, okay, so this year I was lucky enough to actually attend the Creating Change Marathon and Nonprofit Conference, and it was a wonderful experience. And as I mentioned, I was just blown away. Sorry, siren. I was blown away by how well Discovery just seems to understand the needs and challenges of nonprofits in their communities. And the work that Discovery did for us is actually, we're going to be putting it into effect this afternoon. So stay tuned, tune into our social media accounts, Twitter and Facebook, you'll see some exciting new changes there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what you can really see from this what a difference 12 hours of time and some real commitment from employees can make for a nonprofit like ours and for our entire community. You know, we work with tens of thousands of nonprofits across the country, and they're all benefiting from the work that Discovery did for us. So thank you to Discovery and to other companies that decide to make a commitment to pro bono, because it really does create something that's greater than the sum of its parts.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Shari. So as I mentioned, we have a few minutes for Q&A. We're kind of coming up on the end of the hour here, so I think that what we'll do is, continue to submit your questions as we're going through this Q&A session. Anything that we don't get to during the live session, I'll make sure that the speakers get those questions directly so that we can get answers to you. But I think we have time for just a few questions. So what I thought we'd do is do kind of a round robin and pose one question to each presenter, just to be sensitive to everybody's time on the call this morning. So Michael, could we start with you?
You bet.
All right. So this is kind of a two-part question. So the first is kind of people are curious about what the definitions and differences are between when you're talking about, it was back when we were talking about matching gift campaigns and the different participation levels in the different types of campaigns. And it said, we were talking about year-round policies versus typical workplace giving campaigns. And I'm wondering if you could kind of explain the difference between the two of those.
Yeah, certainly. So this was a way we've asked this question for a number of years to try to distinguish between large events. Oftentimes, companies are running United Way events, and that's sort of the most common workplace giving campaign. But it typically has costs tied to developing an event over a specific period of time, and it could be weeks or a month, versus year-round giving, which just lacks that event. It doesn't have the cost associated with creating an event and bringing everyone together, and rather is more of just an opportunity that's provided to employees on an ongoing basis. Oftentimes they'll be related to paycheck deductions for nonprofits or something of that matter. And so I think that event side is really the big difference between the two there.
Great, thank you so much. And the second part of that question was that you were kind of mentioning that you were surprised, whenever all of the numbers came out, by the low engagement level in the year-round policies. And I'm wondering if you saw kind of that same participation, or if it's something that you measured. If it's not, that's really fine. But numbers and engagement levels in volunteer programs, and if there was that same kind of disparity between engaging in giving programs and engaging in volunteering programs.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we ask about volunteer participation rates, but we do not break it out by specific programs. So we're not exactly certain how the different types of programs compare, but we are able to look at how companies compare in terms of engaging employees and then tying that back. And so a lot of our work is doing benchmarking and understanding what types of programs are offered by the companies that offer them certain types of programs, but we do not ask for the individual programs. One thing I will say is that we did a regional analysis on that in terms of looking at what companies had the highest percentage participation, and the average participation in Midwest companies based out of the Midwest, they oftentimes have employees all throughout the globe because these are some of the largest businesses in the world. So they're not necessarily volunteering in those areas, but they had a 34% participation rate, and that was the highest compared to any other region across the world.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to and kind of shift focus a little bit from talking about giving and volunteering and move over to a question for Discovery about pro bono programs. So do we have the Jens and Laurel on the line?
We sure do.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about the need to be prepared and be ready to launch a pro bono program, because it is a lot of work, and it really they're really in-depth and really involved programs. I'm wondering if you could offer kind of one key what's the biggest thing that somebody who is, really wanting to start offering pro bono service at their companies, what's the number one wish I would have known it before we started thing that you would tell them to be prepared for?
I think it's probably working really hard at matching the ask with the skill set. Mm-hmm. That took us some time and really a lot of thinking around that. And just as difficult in terms of choosing how many nonprofits we want to get, equally difficult and challenging, but also equally rewarding, is making sure that we satisfy all the people who really want to help. Mm-hmm. And that first year we did it, we had so many people who really wanted to help and volunteered. We post out kind of a call to action, if you will, using our internal resources here. And there were a lot of people who volunteered but didn't necessarily match what people were asking for. So we felt kind of bad that we weren't able to actually deploy them in any kind of way, which is another reason why we ended up doing this conference, because it was something that we were able to, again, give more to more nonprofits, but also give more to our employees. And that took us the first year to kind of figure that out and be really, really specific about that. I would say that, as well as really being realistic about what you can do and what you can do well. And it usually takes, it took us the first year to kind of figure that out and not be afraid to learn from others. I mean, I think, Shari, you made a really good point. Thank you for all the lovely compliments you gave us about what we deliver to VolunteerMatch. But the reason why we get nonprofits is because we have really great partners like VolunteerMatch and Global Giving, and we work hard to understand what nonprofits need. Yeah, so I think that's how I would end it.
And this is Shari, and I would also say one thing you do a great job of, I was really excited this year when I got to the conference to see that you had expanded the scope of the project to include some of your HR and payroll people as well, which wouldn't necessarily be a logical extension of brand and creative work, but it allowed more of your employees to participate. And I think thinking creatively about how to apply the talents of your employees is a really great way to create a successful pro bono program.
Yeah, thanks. That was intentional, but we had to do, we got pretty innovative about that. And truth be told, it wasn't our idea. We actually got requests from, I think it was HR that came at us first, that said, how can we participate in creating change? And we went, that's a great idea. And then we just ran with it from there. And this year, I feel like, was probably our best year from that perspective, so thank you.
Going back really quickly to Jen's point, it's the matching of the skill set so that the bare basics are going to get done really, really well. And then Jen and I were talking before, one of the other beautiful things that comes out of this is the cross-collaboration amongst the different teams. So once you've got those bare basics covered, how can you get creative around having someone from communications work with someone from the agency and potentially even someone, oh, you know what, there's a little angle where HR could weigh in on that, or government relations could really plug in there. And that's something that we try and have as a consistent theme through all of our impact initiatives, is that cross-collaborative experience.
That's great. I'm glad that specific topic came up of really thinking, innovatively about how, departments or certain services that you wouldn't necessarily think as typically a pro bono type service can really still be involved and still be utilized, because I think that's so important about such an important idea for people to take away with that and really be able to, again, look like I was saying at the beginning, look at their companies and be able to see where the non-traditional type of service might be able to come from. And I think that kind of opens the doors to allow more companies to be able to provide services to nonprofits that have never really been done before. And I think that's very cool.
Yep. And some of the beautiful things that happen is if a designer is on a team and the organization hasn't necessarily asked for a logo, but the designer says, you know what, we're going to throw in a logo in there as well. Yep. That's often where a lot of the magic happens, and the nonprofits are so.
Oh yeah, and the nonprofit gets so much more out of it.
Yeah. And then I'll tuck in one more point to that, only because I think it came up in the beginning. I think, Shari, you said it. this experience for us is not a once and done, because one of the great things that happens out of creating change is that everybody who gets to work on a project usually falls absolutely head over heels in love with their nonprofit. And we have had plenty of people who continue that relationship through the year. We have not one but two service dogs at Discovery Channel right now as a result of an organization that we worked with, and we're socializing them to be good service dogs. And then one of the things that I'm doing with my team, and I'm hopefully can encourage others to do, tonight I'm going to volunteer with my team as a holiday give back to Diaper Bank, which is a local organization here that we took on for creating change. But it touched so many of the people on my team, many of whom are young moms, that they felt like they needed to extend that, throughout the year. And, that's a win-win. That's a good team-building experience for my team. It gives people different perspective, and it extends that relationship beyond creating change.
Oh, that's awesome. We need to find a local organization we can help and get service dogs too.
They're great. We love them.
Nothing like having a dog in the office. It's so great.
Yeah.
So real quick, before we wrap up, I wanted to just ask one question of Shari. So in a similar vein as how we're talking about what's the one thing that companies should really think about and do before they start a pro bono program, what's the biggest thing for nonprofits as they prepare to accept pro bono service? What's the biggest thing that they should, one thing they should do or prepare by doing?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I think it's critical for the pro bono partner to understand the challenges that nonprofits face. And a lot of nonprofits are coming at a relationship like this with no context, no idea about the best way to run things. And so as much as a partner like Discovery can help guide them, that can really lend itself to the success of the relationship. I would say the nonprofits that have the most success when working with pro bono partners really do a lot of preparation up front. They have a very good idea of what exactly they need, how the partner can fulfill those needs, and what they're prepared and what they have the capacity to put into the relationship as well. And actually, Taproot Foundation has come up several times, not surprisingly, and Taproot has some amazing resources for nonprofits when it comes to preparing for and facilitating a pro bono partnership. It's called Powered by Pro Bono, and you can just Google it or find it on their site, and it's a really awesome resource. They have a book, they have interactive website functionality. But I think if your company already does or is thinking about developing a pro bono program, as I said, it's really important to understand things from the nonprofit side. So I recommend taking a look at that.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, we're I know we started a few minutes late, but we're going a little over the hour. So I think that, we'll go ahead and kind of get things wrapped up. Thank you so much for a great Q&A session. And again, anyone who we didn't get your questions answered, I will be sharing those questions with all the presenters, and we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. So as we kind of wrap up this morning, I just wanted to remind everybody that there are a few other ways that you can stay informed and be part of the Best Practice Network here at VolunteerMatch. The first is through our blog, volunteeringiscsr.org. The second is by following us on Twitter at @DM_solutions. And don't forget to check it this afternoon because we're going to have Discovery's beautiful designs launched on our site. And the third is signing up for our company's newsletter, which you can sign up for on the blog as well. And last but certainly not least, this is the last webinar of 2013. So we will be seeing you all next year on January 15th, where we'll be joined by Allison Dorsey of LinkedIn, Jill Silliphant of Deloitte, and Mary Hyde from the Corporation for National Community Service. And we're going to be talking all things volunteering and employment, and really focus in on benefits, not just for companies, but for individuals and nonprofits as well. So this is part of our joint Nonprofit Insights and Best Practice webinar series, and we're going to be inviting our corporate audience and as well as our nonprofit and volunteer audiences to join this one. So it's going to be a fun kickoff for the new year. On that note, I hope everybody had a great morning. I found the conversation very interesting, and I'm always so excited to have CECP every year, reviewing all of their amazing research that they do. It's so much work that goes into that every year, and it's so wonderful to be able to share it with everyone. So with that note, thank you so much to Michael and to Shari and to our Discovery crew over there, Jen, and Laurel, for a wonderful call this morning. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season and New Year's, and we'll see you all in 2014.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.